Let's talk more about the influence of big tech here, and welcome back Dave Rubin, host of the Rubin Report. He's also the author of Don't Burn This Book, Thinking for Yourself in an Age of Unreason. Dave, great to see you again.
John, I did not realize until you just said that Trump's site was hacked. I just sent all those guys all my Bitcoin.
You know, I mean, I did the same thing. They told me I was going to get it back, though. I'm waiting. We'll find out. But I'm sure a lot of people were surprised. You know what? This reminds me, I should probably check on the Kamala Harris website, see if it's still linking back to that Minnesota Freedom Fund type situation. But anyway, I digress. You know, Dave, I got to say, I'm a little optimistic. I'm not very optimistic when I watch one of these congressional hearings today, but that exchange with Roger Wicker there, Ted Cruz getting tough with Jack Dorsey. Question for you is this, though. Is there anything Congress can really do to rein in big tech, or is it too late?
Yeah, about that optimism, forget it, my friend. Look, I consider myself a world-weary optimist in that I'm a realist first, but I think for guys like us that talk for a living and try to get people to understand important issues and get to the truth, you have to be a realist, but at some level you also have to be an optimist. Otherwise we would just go crazy. I mean, you'd be drinking yourself silly if you do what we do and you weren't an optimist at some level. That being said, you know, we are 6 days out from the election, so they can talk tough, and guys that I like and respect a lot, especially Ted Cruz, it's like it's great watching them grill these guys. But we're 6 days out. Nothing can be done at this point. The ship has sailed. This is theater, unfortunately. I'm glad it's happening because at the very least it wakes up people, right? We're talking about it now. Your audience will hear it. My audience will hear it. That's great, so people will understand the underlying issues. But the idea that 6 days out they're going to do anything other than talk, I mean, that's just crazy. The time for action really was about 2 years ago. What the correct action is, as we've discussed many times, I mean, there's a really interesting debate about that, but there's nothing that can be done at this point.
Well, we'll talk more about what could be done potentially, but I want to focus in on the Hunter Biden story because it's important as it relates to this whole entire situation and the impetus for this hearing today. Tony Bobulinski, the Biden family whistleblower, was on Fox News last night. He was asked about what Joe Biden said at the debate and that he had no direct knowledge of Hunter Biden's overseas business deals, but Bobulinski obviously balked at that. Here he is.
That's a blatant lie. When he states that, that is a blatant lie. I'll be honest with you, I almost stood up and screamed liar and walked out because I was shocked that after 4 days or 5 days that they prepped for this, that the Biden family is taking that position to the world.
Dave, you have a huge audience on your YouTube platform. We have a growing audience here. Tucker Carlson obviously has a massive audience, but anyone who's not watching our programs, are they paying attention to this story? Because it's so important what Bobulinski is saying here. You can already start to see the left doing what they accuse the right of doing to Alexander Vindman, trying to besmirch Tony Bobulinski as not credible here. But why isn't anybody paying attention?
John, I know you know the answer to that question, but it's still a good question. I mean, they're not going to pay attention to this story because it goes against the narrative. Look, Tony Bobulinski, I mean, he seemed in that interview, I watched the whole thing with Tucker, he seemed to be more confident and more in the direction of truth and clear in what he was talking about than anything you get out of politicians these days. That doesn't mean that absolutely everything he said is the truth, and of course it all has to be verified and everything else. But your broader point about, okay, you're going to talk about it, I'll talk about it, Tucker will talk about it, we'll see it in sort of right-wing Twitter, it'll catch fire. But you know what? Nothing from Jake Tapper on CNN, nothing from MSNBC, obviously. I don't know if anything came out on ABC, NBC, or CBS, and that's why I always bring everything back to the reality war, the war on reality, because there is something here for sure. Maybe it isn't the gold mine that people on the right want it to be, but there's absolutely something here, and the fact that the mainstream media won't touch it, well, they're burning their own house down, because fortunately, for as long as we still have the tools of social media, and as per the first story, I don't know how long that'll be, but for as long as we do, we can still share information with people. And, you know, often when they don't share a story, when they don't cover a story, that says far more about the story than if they would just cover it.
Yeah.
They could just, you know, CNN could just get up there and say, you know, on Tucker tonight, we're always trying to cancel Tucker, we're always calling him a racist and all this other stuff. But tonight, you know, he put up this guy and he's worked with the Biden family and he made these allegations. And you know, we don't think it's true, or whatever their analysis is, put it up there. and then allow people to make a decision. But when you hide it, you're saying far more about yourself than you're saying about Tony or about Hunter or about Joe.
Right. And what we've seen, too, is this information is going to get out there. They can censor the New York Post all they want, but that only garners more interest in the story. And when it used to be, as journalists, a lot of the journalists who were my mentors, they would say when people start to stop you, or that's when the curiosity should increase here. But you see the opposite effect from the mainstream media. They seem less curious the more information that comes out here. And you'd think they want to hold the powerful accountable, but we know they only want to hold certain powerful people accountable. All right, so let's
John,
talk.
I know you get all my 80s and 90s movie references.
Yes.
So, Jim Carrey, Ace Ventura, The Truth Will Set You Free.
The Truth Will Set You Free.
The one that came up with that.
And Dave, I made a Fall Guy reference, the old TV show Fall Guy reference yesterday, and I got a lot of blank stares. So anyway, I watched a lot of reruns too. But I want to talk about something that Joe Rogan said on his podcast. He had Alex Jones on yesterday, a guy who's been deplatformed. And I think it was you who tweeted you didn't think they were going to stop deplatforming people at Alex Jones, right? But anyway, so they're talking about this whole situation here, and let's play that exchange.
We see this with the New York Post being censored.
Election meddling.
We see it with the New York Post being censored with this Hunter Biden story. Whether you agree with the story being leaked or not, the fact that the New York Post, which is a legitimate newspaper, as outrageous as they are, and the fact that the White House press secretary gets banned from Twitter for tweeting that link.
That's very dangerous.
This is crazy.
I mean, I know this is Alex Jones. He says a lot of off-the-wall stuff, but right, he is kind of the poster child for some of the things he said. Now, there are things he said about Sandy Hook which obviously need to be controlled here. But when you look at the overall scope and you look at Section 230, they're not supposed to have any providence over what Alex Jones says, but we know they do. That was one of the first examples. We see the situation with Hunter Biden's laptop. They are just blatantly violating this Section 230, and that's why I think a lot of people are like, why is this law even still on the books?
Well, not only that, but then when people see the hypocrisy, and Rogan has the biggest audience on earth, well, then they see the hypocrisy and they go, wait a minute, Alex Jones was booted off Twitter, booted off YouTube, can't have, certain payment processors won't work with him, et cetera, et cetera. In effect, the system unpersoned him. And then there he is sitting with the guy who has the biggest audience on earth, basically saying stuff that makes sense. Now, of course, as you're saying, that's not a defense of everything he said in the past. Right. But also, if the idea is the only things that can be said on these platforms are things that are verifiably true, well, then congratulations, there will be literally nobody on these platforms. Yep. We all make mistakes. A lot of people are intentionally lying. I mean, all sorts of stuff. Let's not forget, remember, there was 2 years of a Russian collusion hoax that was all nonsense that MSNBC and everybody else ran with. Rachel Maddow should be booted off Twitter by their own rules, not by the rules that I would set, but by their own rules. And what this does then is people watch that and they go, boy, that Alex Jones, he just made a good point. This does feel like election interference. I want to find out more about Alex Jones. So they're actually driving people to Alex Jones. Yep. And that's why sunlight is the best disinfectant. You let stuff be out there, and then in a free society, which I think we are, at least for another 6 days or so, then people can figure out what's what.
Dave, I get my 18th century French philosophers mixed up from time to time. I think it was Voltaire who said, I'm not going to defend what you say, but I will defend to the death your right to say it. Don't quote me.
Wait, that wasn't Ace Ventura too?
Maybe it should have been. I think it was in Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, one of the historical figures they quoted. Anyway, great to see you as always, Dave. Appreciate your time. Enlightening conversation as usual. We'll see you soon.
You just watched Newsmax TV, America's fastest growing cable news channel, now in more than 70 million homes. You can get Newsmax TV on your cable system or check your cable guide. And if your system doesn't carry Newsmax, call them, tell them you want Newsmax TV, because we're real news for real people.